Now you're looking at live pictures of the House Intelligence Committee. They're about to have an open public hearing. The director of the FBI, the director of the National Security Agency will be testifying. Also, in just a couple of hours, Judge Neil Gorsuch will be in the hot seat, also up on Capitol Hill. A confirmation hearing for the president's Supreme Court nominee is set to begin. Gorsuch will testify in front of senators who are looking to pinpoint the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room. Sutherland, set the scene for us.
Well, today's such an important day, Wolf, for Neil Gorsuch, Trump's nominee for Supreme Court Justice. We are outside the Senate Judiciary Committee, where in just a few hours, his confirmation hearing will start, likely just day one of a 4-day process. But the key thing to watch out for today, Democrats on the committee, in their opening statements, expect them to give a preview of what line of attack, what line of questioning they will bring to this confirmation process. And a lot of them have already signaled that they do intend to turn this into something of a referendum on President Trump, not only talk about Gorsuch's judicial philosophies, constitutional philosophy, but get into some of the more controversial aspects of President Trump, his so-called travel ban, his likely to discuss Gorsuch's willingness to stand up to President Trump. So all those things likely to be hit by Democrats. We've heard from Senator Blumenthal. He's been very outspoken on all this. He has pledged to use every tool at his disposal, including the filibuster, if his answers today on New Day.
I want him to be more explicit and forthcoming on that issue, judicial independence, and also on some of the other areas, workers' safety, privacy rights, Roe v. Wade. And let's remember that the Supreme Court is more than just marble pillars and judicial robes. It is the flesh and blood embodiment of American justice.
I mean, what other tools are you prepared to use? Because if they can't get 8 Democratic votes to get the 60 count, it's likely that the nuclear option will be invoked. So what are the other tools you're talking about?
The main tool is, in fact, the 60-vote threshold and the filibuster.
Now, that's just a preview there of a potential larger fight to come if and when Gorsuch gets out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. This moves to a full vote in the Senate. And Democrats, if they're united and stand up to block Gorsuch, Republicans have already threatened to use the so-called nuclear option, which would essentially lower the number of votes needed to get him through, could pass along party lines. Wolf, as you know, that would be Gorsuch's nomination. Wolf.
All right, Sutherland, we'll have live coverage of that Judiciary Committee hearing as well. You know, Jake, it's not just one issue. The House Intelligence Committee hearing, the Senate Judiciary
leadership has the votes to pass that repeal and replace bill. But let's focus on Gorsuch right now and bring back our panel along with senior political commentator and former senator from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum, CNN political commentator and former press secretary Hillary for America, and former Justice Department spokesman Brian Fallon, and also with us, of course, CNN senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. And Jeffrey, let me start with you. We're going to hear a lot about the rulings that Judge Gorsuch has done, but I suspect we're also going to hear a lot about his time in the Bush Justice Department, especially when it comes to presidential powers and it comes to extraordinary rendition and torture. And also we're going to hear about his time as a professor and whether he ever said or did anything in his life as a professor that might set off alarm bells as well.
And you're going to hear a lot from the senators, and you're not going to hear a lot from Judge Gorsuch. I mean, ever since 1987, when Robert Bork testified and really engaged with the senators on substance of his views, every subsequent nominee has taken the message, which is less is more. Don't answer questions other than in real generalities, and I expect that's what we'll see. We will get a picture of what kind of person he is, of his general approach, but will he vote to overturn Roe v. Wade? Will he support the continued deregulation of political campaigns and Citizens United? Will he support affirmative action? We're not going to get those answers for sure. We can have a pretty good idea of how he feels about those issues based on his record, but he is going to tiptoe around those.
And Brian Fallon, Judge Gorsuch will be introduced by one of the shining stars of progressive jurists in this country, Neil Katyal, who was an acting Solicitor General for President Obama, had a landmark case before the Supreme Court. Will that help Judge Gorsuch before the Democratic members of the committee, you think?
I have to say the rollout of Neil Gorsuch has been one of the few things that has probably gone right for this Trump White House. So even though they have this hearing today on Russia connections, it's a very fortuitous development for the Trump White House that it's the same day as Neil Gorsuch. I think in terms of emphasizing his bio, the fact that he's a Midwesterner, and we keep hearing about all this personal features about him, that he's an avid outdoorsman. He's had a relatively good run of meetings on Capitol Hill. So I do think that that will help him. But I do think, to Jeffrey's point, the lack of assurances on some of these key questions is going to be enough for a lot of these Democratic senators to say, I cannot support him.
And Senator, what are you looking for?
I'm looking for the Ginsburg standard, which is no hints, no forecasts, no previews, which means he's not going to say anything about how he's going to rule on any of these. He's not going to give any indication. I think Jeffrey's absolutely right on that. This is going to be a political test when it's all said and done.
You know, we talk a lot about the Republican base, but the Democratic base is very engaged on Gorsuch.
Well, that was my point. I think that this is going to be a political test, and whether the Democrats are going to, the Democratic base are going to push Democrats to block this nominee just because he's a Trump nominee, not because he's not qualified, just because he's a Trump nominee and he's going to be more conservative than what they want.
But Gloria, even if there is a filibuster, you need 60 votes.
Right.
There will be 52 Republicans who will all vote to confirm. The expectation is there are a lot more than 8 Democrats who will vote to confirm as well.
Well, and millions of dollars have been spent, particularly like Montana for Senator John Tester. So they're trying to make sure of that. But one thing I want to add to this is that there's something simmering underneath all of this, and for the grassroots, and there is a resentment about what happened to Judge Garland, that they believe, Democrats believe, this is a so-called stolen seat, and that they believe Garland should have been confirmed and that it was taken away from the Democrats. And so there are some Democrats I've talked to who said, you know what, an eye for an eye. I really, there are Democrats who feel very strongly about this, and that it isn't so much about Gorsuch per se, but there's a debate now. Do you go all out on Gorsuch, or do you wait until the balance of the court is actually at stake and go all out on the next nominee, if there is?
And of course, there's presidential politics at play here, John. The idea that, said that his vote to filibuster, essentially, Judge Alito, was a vote that he regretted. That said, when you look at the field of Democrats in the Senate who are thinking about a 2020 presidential run, I cannot imagine that any of them, just because of the pure politics of it, are inclined to vote with Judge Gorsuch. On the other hand, as has been pointed out, you have 10 Democrats up for re-election in red states that Trump won, including Florida, not just states like Montana, but states like Florida, states like Pennsylvania. What did they do?
Well, they have to watch this play out. One of the reasons those Democrats have not committed so far, I think it's an open question as to whether they get those Democrats. If in a normal circumstance, you would say yes, those red state Trump Democrats would come over to Judge Gorsuch. But this is not a normal circumstance, in part because the president's approval rating is low, and in part because of the incoming from Democratic interest groups. The incoming is remarkable. So watch Heidi Heitkamp, watch Joe Manchin in West Virginia, but then to your Bill Nelson question in Florida, Trump just won Florida. Trump just won Michigan. He just won Wisconsin. So when you watch those senators, they're 1-point races. They have a little bit more leeway. But I think it's a fascinating question. To your 2020 question, Elizabeth Warren has an op-ed in the Boston Scalia was confirmed 98-0. That was 30 years ago, 29 years ago. That and how Supreme Court picks have changed over a quarter.
Congressional reporter Romano, you're there with a guest.
Yeah, that's right. Peter King of New
Intelligence, the Russian government, or anybody involved. It's a Russian operation. Also, leaks, which go beyond just palace intrigue or White House maneuvering, which goes on all the time. I'm talking like of his looking at the whole Russian operation, or the government looking at the operation, how the report was put together back in December and January.
What you've seen so far, is there anything to indicate that there was any collusion whatsoever between Trump campaign officials?
But from everything I've seen and looked into and people I've spoken to, there's no evidence at all whatsoever of that.
What about the fact that some Trump associates did have conversations with Russian officials? Roger Stone, for instance, having communications with Guccifer II, known as a hacker to American intelligence. Is that an indication that there could have been those contacts?
That goes on all the time, especially in the world we live in now. I've been on trips to Russia with President Clinton, where they're encouraging American business to get involved. You go into New York, people own real estate. People There is a tremendous amount of business and cooperation, discussion between Russians and Americans all the time. And it was known, for instance, that Paul Manafort, who was the campaign chairman, he did business in Ukraine. I've seen no evidence at all.
Do you want Roger Stone Paul Manafort to come before the committee, Michael Flynn, ask them questions about these issues that have come up?
I think we have to see if there's any evidence there, just to call them before the committee if there's evidence against them. But if there's anything found, or if they want to explain themselves, yeah, they have every right to.
Do you know if the FBI is in fact conducting an investigation into the Trump campaign and Russian officials?
I can't comment on that.
So, of course, the wiretapping allegation is something that will certainly come up here over the weekend. Both Nunes, the chairman, and Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat, said there's nothing in those DOJ documents that show any sort of wiretapping ordered by President Obama. Do you want the White House to drop this altogether? Is it time for them to move on?
Well, I wish the issue hadn't been raised, because quite frankly, this hearing would have been going ahead anyway this week or next week, and we would have been focusing on the extent of Russian influence in the election, which is a real issue, and both parties should be interested in that. Instead, we sort of being sidetracked somewhat. Listen, I think there was something there in the extent that it could have been information that worked its way to the media, worked its way to Democrats that came from either investigations or surveillance or whatever, but to overshoot it by saying that President Obama intentionally did it, I see no evidence.
So what should the White House do now? Should they completely walk it back? Should the President of the United States apologize to his predecessor?
I'm going to get through today's hearing first. I'm not going to tell the President what to do, but I wouldn't have said it in the first place.
And you've seen anything in those documents to suggest there was any wiretapping, or if President Trump's communications were picked up in any way?
I'll rely on Chairman Nunes. He's seen nothing. He has access to more than the rest of us do. If he's seen nothing, then I'll go with Devin.
But just to put a button on this, do you want the White House to drop this wiretapping allegation altogether?
I would just as soon drop it. We have enough significant issues to discuss, and to me, enough questions about what happened in the Justice Department and or the intelligence community that raise issues about whether or not classified information was leaked in properly. That is what focusing on, not whether or not there was a specific order, which as far as I know, there was none.
Okay. All right. I know you're a busy day. Thank you so much for talking to us. Appreciate it. All right. Wolf and Jake, back to you.
All right, Mano, thanks very much. Soon the FBI Director James Comey will finally testify on President Trump's unfounded claim that President Obama ordered a wiretap on Trump Tower. This is
Choose to go, to indulge your curiosity, to see where it takes you. Meet the leaders who changed the game. No matter where you are, no matter what the currency, when you run the numbers, they may surprise you. Stay your course. You're on the path to success. CNN Money.